Hello and welcome back to MBA Business Communication, Week 2, where we are going to talk about writing with clarity. This is our first writing lecture, so a rundown on how we're going to spend our time together. We are going to first talk about some of the importance of writing, then we're going to drill down on planning more clarity in your writing around purpose, audience, and finally we'll take a look at a process in the end as well. So, big question kind of comes up. Question of all of this is, why is writing so important? Well, writing helps your ideas get noticed. And when I'm talking to people, whatever you may do, whether that is working for a nonprofit seeking donations, whether you're selling products and services, whether you need to get the buy-in from others at your organization, what you're doing at the end of the day ultimately comes down to helping your ideas stand out and ultimately helping and hoping that other people buy into those as well. So communication matters, and writing is a big manifestation of that communication. And specifically, good writing helps those ideas stand out even farther. A wonderful quote around this comes from one of my favorite sources. That is the TV series The West Wing, specifically from the character of Toby, who was the president's communications director. And I would say that if you think back to, like people said, with shows like Sex and the City, I'm a Miranda, I'm a Charlotte. If you were playing a lame version of that with The West Wing, I would be a Toby. But Toby on The West Wing said, simply put, that the world can move or not by changing some words. Now, a fun story that illustrates this involves a homeless person. Now, you may be saying, this doesn't sound like a very fun story at all, but it is a story that demonstrates the power of writing. Now, there's a homeless man on the street with a sign, and what does it say? But I am blind. So again, a homeless man is blind, and he is seeking donations himself, and he's not seeing a lot of activity. Lots of people passing him by. And all of a sudden, an advertising copywriter, and I've most often heard this story told in advertising copywriting settings, so it's no wonder that it has been recast with an advertising copywriter as a hero. The copywriter looks at the sign and says, can I add something to that will help you and probably lead to more people giving you money? And the homeless man said at this point, sure. So the copywriter takes the sign, writes something else on it, gives the sign back to him, goes on about his way. And of course, the donations pick up over time. And finally, the homeless man is wondering, what did he write on my sign? And finally, he gets up, gumption, to ask someone, what does my sign say? And they say, well, it says, it is spring and I am blind. So while this added some more words to what he was saying before, it also enhanced the clarity. It told a bit more about a story. And oftentimes, when we're talking about better writing, sometimes with as busy as we all are today, we're responding to emails in rapid fire, and we're just dashing things off, this email, that email, the next email, and we're thinking it would take too long to get a little too precious with our communication, so we'll just send this off. And oftentimes, what we fail to think about is the potential for corrective communications that we might have to do on the other side if we're not being clear about what it is that we say and mean. If we have to start another several rounds of emails, new memos, new reports to clarify what we said when we were too quick before. So we need to look for examples of clear writing in the world around us, which is a good reminder about our semester-long CommBook project. And this is where, as we move through lesson by lesson in communications each week, the first half being on writing, the second half being on speaking and presenting, that as you see things that we're talking about, examples out there in the world of work, whether it is a sign, a memo, an email you got, screenshot that, grab that, and put it into your CommBook and add a paragraph saying how that's relevant to what we're seeing. So how we're going to structure our time talking about writing these first few weeks is we're going to start with writing that is clear, exactly what we're talking about, that has a purpose that it's set out to accomplish. We're going to talk about writing that is concise, making sure that we are both clear and that we're not overdoing it in terms of quantity. More on why that's important later. And then we're going to focus, of course, on being more professional in our communications, what people look for from executives and leaders in the world of work today. And then we'll take a look at how you can be persuasive in your communications. And finally, our last lecture on writing will look at some of the more common forms of writing at work today, including, of course, the not-so-subtle suggestion here in the parenthetical notes, in all caps with an exclamation point. If that is me with a little bit of clarity in my own writing, yes, we will talk about email. But starting with clarity, how do we say it when we're talking about getting clear? It could sound a little bit like a vague, abstract concept. But when we're talking about clarity, specifically when we're talking about clarity with our communications, we want to make sure that we have a purpose to what we're saying. Make sure that we have considered the audience that this communication is for. And that informs the process that we'll use in our eventual composition of what it is we're writing as well. So that's how we're going to spend our time in this lecture this week, and then we'll also look at kind of teeing up what's next with being concise with your writing as well. So as we unpack clarity, the biggest thing in writing at work today is that we're not just writing kind of creatively. We're not writing, unless your business is writing the next great American novel. That is not what you're sitting at your desk at your cubicle doing, right? We're writing with purpose. And in thinking about how to write with purpose, I'm reminded of someone who, ironically, is known for being a novelist, and that is author Rudyard Kipling, author of The Jungle Book, many other stories, and he's one of my favorite strategic thinkers. Now, I'm not sure that he intended his writings to be used like this, but I am always pointing to one of my favorite Kipling quotes in the social media marketing class that I teach, and that is stated by Kipling, "I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when and how and where and who." So these 5 W's, who, what, when, where, why, and of course the one awkward H, how, have been used for generations by folks in journalism to help flesh out stories. You also see them used in the world of business as we use them to expand project management plans that we may be working on. I personally use this kind of an approach to help unpack social media marketing strategy. But I think by answering these questions, we can also get at more purposeful, more clear business communication as well. So first, we have to answer that big question, why? Asking yourself why you're writing this. Is it to secure buy-in? Is it to inform your employees of a new policy? Is it to sell something? There's all sorts of different reasons. This sounds like a deceptively simple question to ask, but think about how many emails you've gotten where you get a couple paragraphs in and you're like, what is the point of this? So that is the best way to focus on making sure that your communications stand out. The next question in our Kipling questions that we can ask ourselves is the what. Asking yourselves, what do you want the outcome of this to be? Because we obviously have some sort of purpose that we have in sending this correspondence, in communicating this, but we also have something that we want in return. So make sure you have that call to action in mind. You know why you're sending this, and you know what you want the outcome to be. Our next Kipling question is who? Asking yourself, who are you writing this to? This sets your tone. So you could be talking to someone inside your organization. You could be sending something to your neighbor, a couple desks over, in the next cubicle. Or maybe someone that you're very close with that works in a remote location. So you have a more casual tone. Maybe this is to someone that is to your superior. So you want to make sure that you are being respectful and very formal in your communications as well, especially also beyond those above you on the org chart, but also considering those external audiences that might be potential prospects, clients, customers that you may be selling to, vendors, partners who you don't know as well. So the who matters a great deal. And in looking at all of these, you could think these are simple questions, but it's an important task in sitting down and doing your pre-writing. Right? If you had creative writing growing up in elementary school, you remember your pre-writing often involved brainstorming, thinking of what kind of characters you wanted. In the business communications context, that pre-writing is done by answering some of these questions. Because when we have these questions answered, then we can start to think about what it is that we're going to say and how we say that as well. Because every sentence that we add should help advance that cause for that audience, hopefully resulting in the call to action that you're looking for. So, example that you might think of. You want to follow up on a proposal that you sent. What do you want? You want them to respond to you with next steps. You sent the proposal, you're not exactly sure where this is at. Who is this for? It is a client who you're moderately familiar with. So you know them, you've met with them, you've obviously prepared a proposal for them, and now you're following up. Dear Ms. O'Connor, I hope this correspondence finds you well. Pursuant to our previous conversations and discussions, I am requesting some necessary follow-up. It occurs to me that we have not yet come to an agreement with regard to the follow-up related to the Kensington proposal I had sent you last week, as well as to your team. When you have a moment, I would greatly like to learn more, either from you or the site team. Sincerely, John Smith. Oh, John Smith. Beyond being cursed with one of the more generic names out there, apologies to any John Smiths in the class, you've also written kind of a tedious email here. And it starts with clarity, what we were just talking about, that there's not a lot of purpose. Why are you sending this? What happens next? I was reading this even just now, and I thought, I'm not exactly sure. John wants someone to email him back, but I'm not sure if anyone reading it or John himself knows exactly what that should look like. And part of that is hard to see because it is a little too formal in tone. It's also overwritten and redundant. There were words like follow-up repeated almost literally in the same sentence, or at least back-to-back sentences. So what could John Smith do a little bit differently? Dear Carol, I hope all is well. Last week, I sent over a proposal for the Kensington project we discussed on June 9th during our meeting with the team. At your earliest convenience, please update me on next steps. Are we okay to move forward? Or do we need another call or meeting to refine this further? Talk soon, John Smith. So this was better. Not just because I read it in a lighter tone, but I read it in a lighter tone because it is lighter in tone in terms of how it's written as well. And that is because it has a more focused clarity and purpose. It is less formal in tone, and it's more concise. We'll talk about this throughout the class, both when we talk about communication, presentation, visualizing those communications, but white space is important in terms both of what you say and what you don't say, and how that guides what the reader's looking at as well. So in thinking about these Kipling questions that we've been talking about, the 6 serving men, who, what, when, where, why, how, we've defined why we're doing this and the approach that we've taken. But what we're going to look at next in the second half of this week's lecture is going to focus a little bit more on audience. So who we're talking to is what we'll talk about in the next module.